Hi everyone, this is the Nordic Venture Show, your guide to the exciting world of Nordic startups and venture capital. In today's episode, we're exploring a startup called CurifyLabs.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to get into something pretty interesting, something that I think we've all thought about, at least anyone who's been following this space, and that's the idea of personalized medicine and how medicines might be made in the future. We're using CurifyLabs for our sources today for this deep dive. We've got their website, their main website, their FAQ, and their technology overview.
Yeah, I think what jumps out right away from these materials is this challenge that CurifyLabs is trying to address. The fact that so often with medication, it's really a one-size-fits-all approach. And they're really pointing towards this future where medication can be tailored to your individual needs. And it makes you think about all the different situations where standard doses of medication might not be ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And CurifyLabs is not just talking about this future. They're actually presenting a system to get us there. They're trying to make personalized medicine a reality while addressing these real-world hurdles that exist for pharmacies and for healthcare systems more generally. So today what we really want to do is understand their compounding system solution. How does it work? What are the ripple effects? What are the potential benefits for pharmacists, for doctors, for patients, maybe even for, veterinarians? So let's get started. Where do we even begin to unpack this compounding system solution?
Well, the best place to start is with understanding that it's a pretty interconnected approach. They describe it as four key components. First, they've got the hardware, and that's the Pharma Printer. Then they've got what they call their GMP-manufactured Excipient Bases. And then the third component is their Formulation Library, and that's the software that really guides the process.
Yeah.
And underpinning everything is this integrated in-process quality control.
GMP-manufactured Excipient Bases.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. What makes those so important for you to understand this technology?
These are essentially ready-to-use, high-quality starting materials. They've got that GMP stamp of approval, so they're produced following those good manufacturing practice guidelines. And this is really rigorous. It's similar to how they would make, finished pharmaceutical products, so you're ensuring consistency and quality and safety from the get-go. And then pharmacies can take these bases, combine them with an active ingredient or an API, either as a raw powder or even by crushing existing tablets or capsules. And for you as a listener, that means a more standardized and reliable starting point when we're talking about creating these custom medications.
So you've got that base, you've got the API, and how does the Pharma Printer actually fit into the picture? Sounds like the workhorse here.
Yeah, for sure. It is. The Pharma Printer, they describe it as this automated robot about the size of, a desktop printer. So that gives you an idea of the scale. And its job is to accurately dispense that excipient base and the API together to create the correct dosage form. So they mentioned tablets, liquids, films, even suppositories. So quite a lot of flexibility there. And one thing that's really impressive is the speed. They claim it can produce a dose in just 1 to 3 seconds. Potentially, you're looking at around 1,000 doses per hour if you factor in the quality control steps. So for you, if you've ever waited for a compounded medication, this speed could really be a game changer.
Yeah, that's a huge game changer. That kind of speed is a big deal, and it's not just about speed. In the FAQ, they mentioned that it can dose directly into blisters and molds and vials, so it seems like it would streamline the final stages of actually dispensing the medicine, which, again, saves time, reduces all those manual steps. What about the machine itself? What kind of footprint are we talking about?
It's definitely designed with a pharmacy in mind. It weighs 45 kilograms, and dimension-wise, you're looking at, roughly 66.5 centimeters high, 63.2 wide, and 69.5 deep. And importantly, it's got that CE marking for laboratory use. And it's manufactured in Europe, so that suggests it meets, certain standards for quality and safety. So for you, it's a sophisticated piece of equipment, but something that's designed to fit into that existing workspace.
Okay, so we've got the high-quality starting materials. We've got this fast, precise machine. How does this Pharma Printer know what to do? And that's where the Formulation Library, the software, comes in, right?
All right. Exactly. The Formulation Library, that's the brains behind the whole operation. So CurifyLabs explains that it guides users through these well-established compounding procedures, and it contains these things that they call quality dossiers. So think of these as like these comprehensive information packets, kind of like a really detailed recipe and a quality control report all in one. And they include critical information about how stable the medication is over time, how well it dissolves in the body, very detailed records of each batch that's produced so you can trace it back, and even step-by-step cleaning protocols to prevent contamination. What stands out to you about all of this information?
Well, the idea of these pre-programmed blueprints for each API is huge because it removes so much of the potential for error. It means that individual pharmacies don't have to reinvent the wheel each time they want to compound a medication. And the fact that they've got over 200 APIs already included with a focus on things like, propranolol, hydrocortisone, metoprolol, clopidogrel, even medications that are really important for children, that really shows that they're addressing those critical needs. But while they develop the formulations at no upfront cost, to access this formulation library, you actually have to have a subscription, which makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they need to constantly update and expand this knowledge base.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like subscribing to, an evolving resource of pharmaceutical expertise. So we talked a lot about getting the formulation right, but how does CurifyLabs ensure that the final product, the final medication, actually meets those necessary standards consistently? Because that's a big deal for the end user.
Well, they've actually built quality control directly into the dispensing process. So the Pharma Printer has this integrated analytical scale that weighs each individual dose as it's being produced. And then on top of that, they use something called in-process near-infrared, or NIR control. So NIR essentially uses light to really quickly check if the ingredients in each dose are evenly mixed. And this two-pronged approach, it really aims to lower that risk of human error and ensure every tablet, every dose, has the right amount of active ingredient. And they even say their goal is 100% quality-controlled tablets.
That level of integrated quality control is really reassuring to know that each dose is being checked in real time, and the fact that they have ISO 13485 certification for their quality management system adds that extra layer of confidence to their process.
What about contamination between different medications? That's a big concern when it comes to compounding. Yeah, that's definitely a big one. They emphasize preventing that cross-contamination, so they've got these cleaning protocols that they say take less than 10 minutes to complete between different APIs, and then they use single-use syringes as an additional safeguard. So again, for you, the listener, that means a lower risk of unintended exposure to other medications, which is, a critical safety consideration.
So I got a pretty good handle now on the core technology. But let's talk about the impact this could have in the real world. If you're a pharmacist, a healthcare provider, or a patient, what are some of the benefits? Let's start with the pharmacies themselves.
Well, for pharmacies, that standardized and faster compounding process, that translates to cost savings and time savings, and that ultimately could benefit the end user by, leading to more efficient service. As their materials point out, it could really help with the workload for pharmacy technicians, especially when staffing is an issue. And then this ability to so easily produce those personalized dosages is a major advantage, for children, especially because they need those very specific doses. And that obviously plays into patient safety as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And with the validated processes, the built-in quality checks, it seems like this system would also simplify regulatory compliance for these pharmacies. Having all that documentation ready to go, the stability data, the batch records, cleaning protocols, that's a big deal. What about for the doctors who are prescribing the medications and ultimately for the patient who's receiving them?
I think for both of those groups, the prescribers and the patients, it all comes down to, safer, more effective medication use because of those validated traceable processes. And because the system can make different dosage forms, it can offer these customized strengths, that means the treatments can be much more precisely tailored to your individual needs. Whether you're a newborn, maybe you just need a tiny fraction of a standard dose, or you're an elderly patient who has trouble swallowing, a large tablet. And that kind of personalization should really lead to, better outcomes and fewer side effects for the patient.
And it's not just limited to humans, is it?
No.
The FAQ mentions that the technology can be used in veterinary practices as well.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle. And it seems like, it could be really useful for vets to be able to create those specific formulations and dosages for different species and different sizes of animals.
So let's get practical here. What's the cost involved for a pharmacy that wants to adopt this system?
Well, CurifyLabs offers a few different options for pharmacies to access the technology. They mentioned purchasing the equipment outright. They also have rental options or even a subscription model based on how many of those excipient bases they use. And then they really emphasize that the initial formulation development for new medications is done at no charge, which is obviously a big benefit. But as we mentioned before, ongoing access to the formulation library does require that subscription. So it's a pretty flexible model that can fit different needs and budgets.
So if a pharmacy wants to get started, what's that process like? How long until they can actually use the Pharma Printer?
Well, according to the FAQ, it looks like the delivery time is about 6 to 8 weeks. And they really highlight how user-friendly the system is, and they say that the onboarding and the training takes about 1 hour. So it seems like they've really focused on making this a smooth integration into a pharmacy's existing workflow.
Regulatory compliance, huge deal in the pharmaceutical world. How does CurifyLabs address those concerns?
Yeah, it seems like they're very aware of that regulatory landscape. They highlight that they comply with the regulations for compounding. They've got that ISO 13485 certification. The Pharma Printer has that CE marking as laboratory equipment. And they provide all that quality documentation for their excipient bases, which, as we said, are manufactured under GMP. And then as we discussed, those in-process quality control measures, they even get into cybersecurity and data privacy. They mention the Pharma Printer doesn't connect to the internet as a server, and that it doesn't store patient data, which is a big deal for GDPR. And they also clarify that it's classified as laboratory equipment, not as a medical device.
So very thorough in terms of addressing those regulatory and safety concerns.
Yeah.
What if a pharmacy already has their own formulations or wants to use different starting materials? Is there any flexibility with the system?
Yeah, it seems like there's quite a bit of flexibility there. The technology overview says that it can handle compounding not just with those excipient bases, but also directly from raw APIs and even from those crushed tablets or capsules. And the FAQ says that users can choose to use their own bases if they want to. However, CurifyLabs does recommend that you use their validated systems, their excipient bases and APIs, to get the best, most consistent dosing and to have full access to all the benefits of the Formulation Library and all of that documentation. So it's a good balance of flexibility, but also the benefits of using their validated system.
It's interesting that they provide that flexibility, but they still make sure that the listeners understand that there are advantages to using their system. Finally, it seems like CurifyLabs is going global, expanding beyond its headquarters in Finland. What's their global footprint at this point?
Yeah, they're definitely expanding. They've got offices in Helsinki, they've got an office in Germany, and one in the US. They specifically mention Atlanta, Georgia. And their website says that their technology is being used in 8 European countries so far, and they're actively involved in all kinds of industry events like the APAA and the EAHP, so they're definitely trying to make a name for themselves on the world stage.
Okay, so let's kind of bring it all together here for the listener. What's the core message that we're taking away from this deep dive into CurifyLabs?
You know, the main takeaway here is that CurifyLabs is presenting this really fully integrated system that has the potential to really change how personalized medicines are made in pharmacies. So by combining that specialized hardware, the high-quality starting materials, the library of validated formulations, and the built-in quality control, they really aim to make personalized medicine, much more accessible and safer and more efficient for everyone involved.
Yeah. And for you, the listener, someone who I know likes to get information quickly and thoroughly, this technology is a really compelling vision of this future where medications can be more precisely tailored to individual needs. And it's got those robust quality control measures in place. And the fact that it's designed to be user-friendly and that it integrates well into those existing pharmacy operations, that's a big deal. So it's a lot to think about.
It is. It really makes you wonder, if technologies like this become more widespread, how might that change the healthcare landscape as a whole? Could we see similar approaches in other healthcare settings beyond just pharmacies? And what new possibilities are out there if we have the ability to create these highly personalized medications on demand? Could we be looking at even more effective and even more targeted treatments in the future?
Definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for listening to this deep dive on CurifyLabs.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Nordic Venture Show. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories of innovation from the Nordics.